Ladies and gentlemen, gather around because today we're taking a look at a car that's so quintessentially 1970s, it might as well have been designed by a disco ball wearing a fur coat. Yes, I'm talking about the Lincoln Continental Mark V, a car that sold nearly 250,000 units in just 3 years. That's right, 228,262 of these things found their way to wealthy driveways across America during a time when the world was knee-deep in an oil crisis. Now, you might think, sure, but it must have been a real gas-guzzling monster, right? Well, it wasn't a monster, but it sure was a beast, and it was everything but ordinary. This video is based on 3 articles about the Lincoln Continental Mark V, one from hotcars.com, another from Haggerty, and a third from Mac's Motor City Garage. You can find the links in the Google Doc linked in the description. I highly recommend checking them out if you want to explore further. Now let's get right into the video. Let's begin with the most obvious thing. The look. The Lincoln Continental Mark V wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It was the automotive equivalent of walking into a room, throwing down a velvet cape, and demanding everyone's attention. In fact, the design was so audacious that it made a Cadillac Eldorado look like a sensible family sedan. We're talking sharp, angular lines, ridiculously over-the-top proportions, and a front end that could cut glass. The 1977 Continental Mark V was a complete redesign over the Mark IV, but not in the way you might expect. Lincoln didn't just round off the edges. They took a knife to the soft curves and slapped on some straight lines that screamed, "I don't need your approval. I've got a 6.6-liter V8 to back me up." It's clear that Lincoln's designers were thinking, let's make something big, bold, and utterly American. And that's exactly what they did. If the Mark IV was a luxury car, the Mark V was luxury on steroids. This car didn't just have a spare tire bump, it had a spare tire bump that could stop traffic. No wonder it was the personal luxury car of the late 70s. And speaking of that V8 engine, let's talk about the powertrain. The Lincoln Mark V didn't do things by halves. No, it came with a 400 cubic inch 335 series V8. That's 6.6 liters of raw American power. Now, you might be thinking, what about the oil embargo? Well, Lincoln didn't care. They said, you know what? Fuel economy's overrated. Let's throw in a monstrous engine that's so powerful it might just send the entire neighborhood into a frenzy. The Mark V could hit top speeds of 120 miles per hour, which, considering the fact that it was the size of a small mansion, was no small feat. But it wasn't just about speed. This thing had presence. It was a car that made you feel important when you sat in it. And then there's the interior. Imagine being seated in a living room on wheels where the carpets are so thick you could lose a child in them. It came standard with shag carpeting. Yes, shag. If you want to feel like you're living in the world's most luxurious 1970s adult film, this was your ride. But it wasn't just about the carpeting. This thing was kitted out. Inside the Mark V, you had power everything. Power seats, power windows, power mirrors. I'm honestly surprised it didn't come with power oxygen, considering how much it pampered its owners. And oh yes, don't call it a clock. The Cartier chronometer was included because obviously you need to be reminded that you're rich enough to afford a car that has its own wristwatch. Let's not forget the standard opera windows, which, to be fair, only made sense if you were attending an actual opera and wanted to be chauffeured in style. Now, here's where things get interesting. While the standard Mark V was a luxury car in its own right, it also had something that not even its competitors could touch: designer editions. Yes, Ford went to some of the most renowned designers of the time, Bill Blass, Cartier, Hubert de Givenchy, and Emilio Pucci, and said, "We want your name on this car and we'll throw in a hefty sum of cash." They were so fancy, they had their names in gold on the opera windows. So let's talk about a car that actually wore designer labels, shall we? These designer editions didn't come cheap. In fact, they added thousands to the price of the car when it was new. And now they're a steal at auction, with prices for well-maintained examples only slightly higher than their standard counterparts. You can pick up a designer edition Mark V today for just around $20,000, which, considering the outrageous luxury it offers, is an absolute bargain. But wait, the story doesn't end there. Oh no, this is where things get even more interesting. You see, originally, the Mark V was going to be downsized. That's right, the Lincoln Continental was going to get smaller. Why? Because Henry Ford II thought the car could use a little trim. But then something magical happened. The designers said, "No thanks, we'll keep it big, bold, and completely unmissable." The Mark V stayed exactly the same size as the previous Mark IV. And thank heavens for that, because the world would have been deprived of one of the most magnificent cars of the 1970s. Now let's talk about something that's often overlooked in the world of luxury cars, the Mark V's cultural impact. You see, this wasn't just a car for the rich and famous, it was a car that became famous. It seeped into pop culture like a good bottle of whiskey into a fancy glass. In the late 1970s, if you were rolling around in a Mark V, you weren't just driving a car. You were making a statement. It was the symbol of prosperity, a bit like the American equivalent of a Rolls-Royce, but with 50% more chrome and an absurdly long bonnet. And it wasn't just wealthy tycoons who drove it. The Mark V captured the imaginations of movie stars, athletes, and even a few rock musicians. Case in point, Tom Selleck. Before he was solving crimes and charming audiences in Magnum P.I., he was helping to cement the Mark V's place in the cultural zeitgeist, appearing in ads that showcased the car's luxurious appeal. But it wasn't just Hollywood and TV shows that kept the Mark V in the limelight. There was also the broader cultural fascination with what this car represented. The late 70s were a time of dramatic change, gas crises, economic downturns, and shifting social attitudes. But while the rest of the world might have been tightening their belts, the Mark V, with its 6.6-liter V8 engine, was the very opposite of austerity. It was a middle finger to all of that. It said, we don't care about the future. We live in the now, and right now, we want to drive something that tells everyone we've arrived. Today, the Continental Mark V stands as one of the most enduring symbols of automotive excess. It's not just a car, it's a piece of history, a time capsule that encapsulates the glitz, glamour, and audacity of the 70s. And while it may be known for its over-the-top features and gargantuan proportions, it's that very excess that makes it so timeless. After all, what's luxury without a little indulgence? Whether you're admiring it from the comfort of your vintage car dealership or you're lucky enough to own one, the Mark V will always stand as a reminder that sometimes, in a world that tries to downsize everything, it's good to go big. And no matter how much the world has changed since the 1970s, that message is still very much alive today. So if you ever find yourself behind the wheel of one of these beasts, remember, you're not just driving a car, you're taking part in a bit of automotive history. And you know what? That's the kind of thing money can't buy. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe, and I recommend clicking the video on the screen to check out another one I made about what's probably the weirdest car Ford ever designed, the Seattleite 21. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.